I never thought one little word could break me down the way it did. It wasn't whispered. It wasn't hidden. It was shouted, loud enough for everyone in that room to hear. Loud enough to change everything I thought I knew about my place in that family. That word was Dad. Now, before you think this is a heartwarming story where everything just falls into place, let me tell you, it wasn't that simple. In fact, for the longest time, I wasn't sure if I was even wanted. My name's Daniel. I'm 36, and if I'm being honest, my life didn't turn out anywhere near the way I planned. I thought I'd have a couple of kids by now, maybe a house that didn't feel so temporary, and a family that wasn't stitched together with missing pieces. But instead, I found myself walking into someone else's world, a world where I was always the outsider, no matter how hard I tried to fit in. That someone was Jessica. She's beautiful, strong, and the kind of woman who could silence a room with just her presence. But when I met her, she wasn't alone. She had a son, Ethan, 6 years old at the time. And let me tell you, being the guy who comes after Dad isn't easy, especially when that dad isn't gone. Ethan's father? He's still around. Not reliable, not consistent, but just enough to remind me that I was filling shoes that didn't belong to me. And Ethan made sure I knew it. The cold stares, the "you're not my dad" comments, the way he would pull away if I tried to help him with something. It all added up to one thing. I wasn't wanted. Not by him, at least. And I get it. I wasn't trying to replace his father. I just wanted to be there, for him, for Jessica, for the family we were trying to build. But nothing I did seemed good enough. I could fix his bike, help with his homework, sit through hours of cartoons I didn't understand, and still, at the end of the day, I was just Daniel, not Dad. And maybe that's why what happened that night completely broke me down. It wasn't planned, it wasn't expected. It was raw, real, and it came from the one person I least expected to hear it from. But before I tell you about that moment, the moment that changed my life forever, you need to understand how far things had to go before we got there. Because this wasn't just about a kid and a word. This was about trust, about love, about battles fought in silence when nobody else was watching. And it all started with one decision I made. One decision that would put me right in the middle of a storm I didn't know I was strong enough to survive. Because before Ethan ever called me Dad, he made sure I felt exactly what it meant to be nothing but the stepdad. When I first met Jessica, I wasn't looking for anything serious. I had just gotten out of a messy breakup, the kind that leaves you doubting if you're even cut out for relationships anymore. She walked into my life like some kind of unexpected light, warm but guarded. I noticed right away that she carried herself differently. There was strength in her, but also a kind of heaviness, like she had learned not to expect too much from people. We started slow. Coffee dates turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long conversations about everything and nothing. She made me laugh in ways I hadn't laughed in years. But there was always something unspoken sitting between us. Ethan. The first time she introduced me to him, I'll admit, I was nervous. He was this small kid with messy brown hair and serious eyes that looked older than they should have. Kids usually warm up to me, but Ethan didn't. He crossed his arms, barely said hello, and kept one eye glued to the cartoons playing on TV. I told myself it was normal. He didn't know me, after all. But over time, I realized it wasn't just shyness. He saw me as an intruder. Jessica tried to smooth it over, telling me it would take time. And I believed her, so I tried. I tried harder than I've tried at anything else in my life. I showed up to soccer games, even when he didn't look for me in the stands. I sat through birthday parties where his Real dad made flashy entrances with expensive gifts, while I was the one who stayed to clean up after the cake was gone. That was the hardest part, knowing I was doing the work, but never getting the credit. His father would disappear for weeks, sometimes months, and Ethan would still look at him like a hero. Then there was me, the guy who was just there. And I can't blame the kid. His world had already been turned upside down once. He didn't ask for me. I was the reminder that his parents weren't together anymore. To him, I was proof that things had changed, and maybe not for the better. But here's the thing about Jessica. She made me want to stay. Even on the worst days, even when Ethan barely looked at me, I couldn't walk away. Because behind closed doors, I saw her worry. I saw the nights she cried when Ethan asked questions she didn't know how to answer. I saw how hard she worked to give him stability, to protect him from disappointment. And I wanted to help. Still, every step forward seemed to be followed by 2 steps back. A smile one day, a slammed door the next. A shared joke, then a cold silence that lasted for hours. It was a push and pull that left me exhausted but strangely determined. And then, just when I thought maybe things were starting to shift, something happened. Something small, at first, but it shook the ground beneath all of us. Because before Ethan ever called me Dad, there was a moment that nearly convinced me to walk away for good. It happened on a Saturday evening, the kind of evening that was supposed to be simple. Jessica had to work late, so it was just me and Ethan. I figured we'd order pizza, maybe watch a movie, something easy. I wanted it to feel normal, like we weren't just two strangers forced into the same space. But Ethan wasn't having it. From the moment Jessica walked out the door, he barely looked at me. He sat on the couch with his arms crossed, eyes glued to his tablet. I tried small talk, asked about his soccer practice, even offered to let him pick the movie. He didn't budge. Finally, I said, "You know, Ethan, I'm really trying here." He looked up at me with this sharpness in his eyes I didn't expect from a 9-year-old. "You're not my dad," he said flatly. "You'll never be." I wish I could say it didn't hurt, but the words cut deep. I'd heard him say it before, but that night it felt heavier, like he meant every syllable. For a moment, I wanted to give up, to stop trying, to accept that no matter what I did, I'd always be on the outside. But then he added something I wasn't ready for. "My real dad says you're just mom's new toy. You'll leave soon too." That stopped me cold. I didn't know what to say, how to respond. My hands actually trembled because I realized Ethan wasn't just pushing me away. Someone was feeding him reasons to hate me. Someone who should have been teaching him better. I wanted to defend myself, to tell him his father was wrong. But how do you say that to a kid without breaking him in half? So instead, I just sat there, silent, while Ethan picked up his tablet again like nothing happened. Jessica came home later, tired but smiling, asking how our night went. I opened my mouth to tell her, but Ethan cut in first. It was fine. He didn't even look at me. And in that split second, I realized something. This wasn't just about me and him. There was a tug-of-war happening, and Ethan was stuck in the middle. But I had no idea just how ugly it was about to get. After that night, I couldn't shake Ethan's words. "You'll never be my dad. And worse, you'll leave soon too." They played over in my head like a broken record. I wanted to tell Jessica, but every time I looked at her, I saw the weight she was already carrying. The late nights at work, the way she rubbed her temples when she thought no one was watching, the exhaustion of being both mother and peacekeeper. I didn't want to add another burden, so I kept it to myself. But Ethan's father didn't make it easy to ignore. The next weekend, he showed up to pick Ethan up for a fun day. He rolled in late, blasting music from his truck, wearing that smug grin I'd come to know too well. Ethan lit up when he saw him, and I just stood back, trying not to feel invisible. Before they left, though, his father glanced at me and smirked. "Enjoy babysitting when I'm not around," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. I clenched my fists but said nothing. Ethan was watching, and that was the game he was playing. Using Ethan as a shield, as a pawn, as a way to remind me that I'd never measure up. The days that followed only got worse. Ethan grew colder, more distant. He'd ignore me at dinner, roll his eyes when I offered help, and sometimes I'd catch him repeating little digs that sounded exactly like his father's words. Each one chipped away at me. Still, I kept showing up. I kept trying. Because no matter how much he pushed me away, I loved him like my own. And maybe that was my weakness, loving a kid who didn't want me, at least not yet. Then came the night that changed everything. Jessica had planned a small family gathering at her mom's house. Nothing fancy, just dinner with her parents, her sister, a few cousins. I knew it was important to her, so I made sure to be on my best behavior. Smile, help set the table, keep things light. But Ethan wasn't making it easy. He refused to sit next to me, whispered something to his cousin that made them both laugh, and shot me looks that felt like daggers. The room was warm and cheerful, but inside, I was crumbling. Then, halfway through dinner, his father showed up uninvited. He strolled in like he owned the place, tossing a gift bag onto the table as if that excused his absence the past month. Jessica's face went pale. Her parents exchanged glances, but said nothing. And Ethan? He beamed. He jumped up, ran to his father, and hugged him like nothing else in the world mattered. I tried to swallow the bitterness, tried to remind myself that I couldn't compete with blood. But then, the tension thickened. Voices lowered. Arguments flickered beneath polite smiles. Jessica's father shifted uncomfortably, sensing the storm about to break. And in that moment, right as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, Ethan opened his mouth, looked around the crowded room, and said something that froze everyone where they sat. Everyone froze when Ethan suddenly blurted out, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "I don't want to live with you anymore, Dad. I want to stay with him." At first, I thought I'd misheard. My fork slipped from my hand. Jessica gasped. Her mother covered her mouth. But the worst part was watching his father's face twist from shock into pure rage. The room went silent, the kind of silence that feels dangerous. Ethan's little chest heaved as he pointed at me. "Not Jessica. Not anyone else. Me. You don't show up. You don't care." "He does," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "He's my dad now." The words hit like lightning, electrifying the air, setting everything on edge. His father slammed his hand on the table, dishes rattling. "What did you put in his head?" he spat at me. His voice shook with fury, but beneath it, I heard something else, fear. Jessica tried to calm things down, but it was too late. The storm had broken. Because what Ethan had just said wasn't only shocking, it was dangerous. He had chosen sides. And suddenly, it wasn't just about me being a stepdad anymore. It was about a battle I wasn't sure any of us could walk away from untouched. The table erupted the moment Ethan's words settled in the air. His father shot up, pointing a finger at me like I'd committed some crime. "You turned him against me," he barked, his voice shaking the walls. I stayed seated, my hands gripping the edge of the table so tight my knuckles went white. "I didn't put anything in his head," I said, keeping my voice low but steady. This is Ethan speaking for himself. Ethan, still standing, looked torn, his small fists clenched at his sides, tears welling up but refusing to fall. For the first time, he wasn't hiding behind silence. He was choosing. Jessica jumped in, her voice sharp. "Stop blaming everyone else. You've let him down too many times. You think showing up with a toy makes you a father? Being a dad is about showing up every single day." Her father added quietly, "The boy's telling you what he needs." The room was thick with tension. I thought his father would lunge at me, that fists might fly. But instead, he looked at Ethan, really looked. And for once, there was no swagger, no smirk. Just defeat. He muttered something under his breath, grabbed his keys, and stormed out without another word. Silence hung heavy after the door slammed shut. Ethan finally turned to me. His face was red, his eyes wet, but his voice was clear. "I don't care if you're not my real dad. You're my dad." The words hit me harder than anything else ever could. My chest tightened, my eyes burned, and before I knew it, I was kneeling down, hugging him like I'd never let go. For the first time, he didn't pull away. It should have been the perfect ending. But then, as the family sat in stunned quiet, Jessica's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and her face drained of color. I looked at her, confused. "What is it?" Her hands shook as she turned the screen toward me. A single message glared back, from Ethan's father. "This isn't over." That message, "This isn't over," sat in my head like a ticking clock. For weeks, I wondered if Ethan's father would show up again, if he'd try to fight for custody just to spite us, or if he'd disappear like he always had. Every knock at the door made my chest tighten. Every unknown number on Jessica's phone felt like a threat. But strangely, nothing happened. He didn't show up at the house. He didn't call. He didn't even bother to check in on Ethan. The only thing left behind was that text, a reminder of the storm he carried with him, but never followed through on. And in that silence, something else started to grow. Ethan and I began to heal. Slowly at first, like a wound scabbing over. The sharpness in his eyes when he looked at me softened. The little digs he'd once repeated disappeared. Instead, he started asking me questions about my work, my past, even my favorite soccer team. It wasn't much, but it was something. One night, weeks after the family dinner, I walked past his room and found him asleep with a drawing taped to the wall. It was messy, drawn with markers, but clear enough. 3 stick figures, holding hands. Above each one was a name. Mom, Ethan, and me. But not Daniel. Not stepdad. Just Dad. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at that piece of paper until my eyes blurred. It wasn't the big public declaration that had shaken the dinner table that night. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, private, his way of saying he'd chosen me without needing an audience. And somehow, that meant even more. Jessica found me there and slipped her hand into mine. "You earned it," she whispered. Not because you tried to replace anyone, but because you stayed. Because you loved him even when he didn't love you back. And she was right. That's what being a parent is, isn't it? Showing up when it's hard. Loving without guarantees. Being steady when everything else feels like it could fall apart. Ethan still sees his father sometimes, though less often now. And I don't try to erase that part of his life. I can't. What I can do is give him something else, something steady, something real. I can be the man who shows up at every game, who helps him with every science project, who listens when he's scared or angry or just needs someone to sit with him in silence. And maybe, one day, he'll forget the years I was just Daniel. Maybe he won't. But that doesn't matter anymore. Because the truth is, I don't need the title to know what I am. I am his dad. Not by blood, not by name, but by choice. And sometimes, that choice means more than anything else. Because family isn't just the one you're born into. It's the one you fight for, the one you refuse to give up on. And for me, that fight was worth everything.